Welcome back, everybody. I'm Brad Brown. That's Wyatt Darby. We're here for some round 2 action. We'll get that updated on the stream here in just a second. Playing some Pioneer. Still in Stage 1. We watched Blue-White Control Mirror last round. That mirror does not look fun to play.
Yeah, I would say last round we did the magic equivalent of eating our vegetables. Watch that blue-white mirror play, and now we get dessert. We have two super sweet decks this round: 5-colored Niv-Mizzet against Lotus Field combo. So we're kind of reaching banger territory and playing a deck that I've never seen before in this format, a Niv-Mizzet, and one of the probably premier combo decks in Lotus Field.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a matchup that I don't think either player probably played against each other before, so it's going to be pretty fresh. And one thing that you like about this is you have open deck lists, so you get to see, if someone just had a 5-color Niv-Mizzet deck and deck lists were closed, there might be a little bit of surprise factor there. But now he can look at deck lists and see, Evan gains, I think, a little bit of percentage there.
Yeah, and one thing about the Niv-Mizzet deck is it's actually structured very similarly to the modern version.
Right.
The backbone is definitely the Niv-Mizzet 4 of plus Bring to Light 4 of to really give yourself a lot of consistency in finding your key card, while also just a lot of flexibility and a lot of different, tutorable high-impact cards for Game 1. So looks like the players are ready, and why don't we kick it down there and start this matchup that, I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So looking at ways he wins here, I see pretty much just the Niv-Mizzets and an Obstinate. He's got a few little creatures like Knight of Autumn, some Hostage Taker, but those aren't really winning you the game per se.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely the 5-color Niv-Mizzet deck is a mid-range deck that is meant to bury other mid-range decks in card advantage. It's hard to contend with the dragon that enters the battlefield and typically draws pretty close to 4, 5, 6 cards with regularity. And in terms of this matchup, Grant has a lot of kind of not great options. The spot removal is going to be pretty problematic. I think what Grant's going to be trying to do is cast Bring to Light for Unmoored Ego. Sure. If you take Fae of Wishes out of Evan Gascon's deck, he's actually down to just one of Emrakul the Promised End to actually close the game once.
Which, if it does resolve, there's a pretty good chance that he can win from there, but it's going to be a little tough. Now, like you said, there's not a whole lot of interaction. Let's look at some of the ways he can interact. So we've got a Thought Erasure, a couple of Drown in the Locks, a Kolaghan's Command can make him discard. He's got an Assassin's Trophy. Maybe he can snag it on Omniscience since, Evan can't really go off at instant speed once the Omniscience is down, right?
Yeah, no, all good points. And he's going to have to interact soon, though, because here we see Evan actually on turn 2 have Sylvan Scrying and pick up kind of the namesake card, a Lotus Field already going to hand with a Thespian Stage in play. So I suspect we'll see the Lotus Field next turn, but having access to start that off so soon it's been a pretty good start with Evan. And actually, the deck just plays Sylvan Scrying so well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a card I did not expect to make these combo decks, but it makes a lot of sense. It's a land with hexproof, enters the battlefield tap, and when it enters, you sacrifice 2 lands. It can be itself, notably, and then you add 3 of any one color of mana. So one of the things you can do with Thespian Stage is this enters the battlefield, Thespian Stage can copy it, and now you have a Lotus Field available for use.
Yeah, without the downside of losing the 2 lands in the process. Yeah, right. So Thespian Stage, really nice innovation, and being a true combo deck, Evan is one of the few decks that really gets to maximize and play a dig through time unbelievably well. You see the full 4 copies, and he does a lot of churning, a lot of cycling, growth spirals, ops, and whatnot, fuel the dig, and he has a very clear, priority list of what he's looking for. So it's definitely a deck that makes the card shine. And here we see, Grant did find his one of discard spell, took the dig, and right now still no pressure. That's kind of the next big thing to check off his list.
Yeah, Evan really looks like he's struggling on lands here, other than that Lotus Field that we know about. Has an Arboreal Grazer in hand as well. No real way to take advantage of that extra land, though.
Yeah, Grazer is an excellent card to speed up the Lotus Field deck by a full turn, but the downside of the card is without any extra land drops, it is pretty close to dead. So we'll see what Evan wants to do before making his Lotus Field land drop. Looks like something is going to get cycled here, probably floating some mana, sacking lands, and we might see a Vizier untap the Lotus Field to take advantage of that extra mana right away.
And there, like you said, we do see the untap. Happens when you cycle, so he gets to draw a card. Looks like he drew into another Vizier. We'll pull up Vizier of Remedies, or Vizier of Tumbling Sands soon. And just wanted to point out that, Cardboard Live extension should be updated, so you can find these deck lists there. So it takes 2 to cycle, and you make 3 mana with Lotus Field. So you're essentially netting a mana every time you use the Vizier.
Yeah, it functions very close to just classic, rituals when combined with Lotus Field. And here we see, Evan deciding to play out Vizier of Tumbling Sands almost just as a triple ramp spell to untap the field the hard way, but that actually gets met with an Abrupt Decay, and now Evan is floating some mana and seeing what he can make happen right now. And actually, picking up a Pore Over the Pages is perfect. He has just the right amount of mana to play that. It's going to allow him to do a lot of sifting, maybe find some extra lands to utilize this Arboreal Grazer even.
Yeah, a little tricky here. You got to remember Lotus Field can only make 1 color of mana, so if he chooses to make mana with it, it'll likely all be blue usually.
Yeah, here we see Pore Over the Pages. For 3 blue, you can draw 3 cards, untap up to 2 lands, and discard a card. So, in terms of spells that untap lands, it's hard to get more fair than this one, but still just absolutely absurd when used to untap Lotus Field. So,
and here we see Grant having one of his 2 of Drown in the Locks. Super important. He's kind of out of gas at this point, though.
Yeah, absolutely critical tag with Drown. Being able to hit the 5 mana Pore Over the Pages this early in the game is kind of surprising. And, Evan really needed that filtering. His hand is kind of stalling out right now. He has access to, maybe cast Granted off Fae of Wishes. He's looking at the sideboard now to see if there's anything that's super relevant with this amount of mana that he has. And honestly, not a ton. He could get a value Finale of Revelation or a Jace Wielder of Mysteries. He does have the mana to cast both of those courtesy of Lotus Field. And looks like another Drown is actually being fired off by Grant. Having 2 of his main deck counterspells is just lining up perfectly here.
Yeah. But there's not much left in his deck that interacts with this combo deck. So, little shy on resources. Really going to need to find something like a Niv-Mizzet to refuel and actually close this game out. And that is kind of one of the problems when you just have a lot of interaction. You can run out of gas, and then your opponent's left with 3 or 4 cards in hand, and they can go off from there.
Yeah, the beauty of this Niv-Mizzet build, though, is you do have a lot of functional copies of Niv between the Bring to Light and the Dragon itself. So Grant is down-ticking Teferi pretty aggressively, looking for that, understanding that I've done a great job of keeping my opponent off kilter, but if this game goes, 5 more turns, eventually I really should be the underdog.
Here we see Evan playing a Growth Spiral, drawing into another Arboreal Grazer. Still has 2 blue mana floating. And I think that's another Pore Over the Pages, if I'm not mistaken, in his hand.
Yeah, it looks like poor Arboreal Grazer.
And a second copy. Yep. Again, Grant doesn't have much action going on. One of the downsides to, say, Sylvan Caryatid versus, say, like a Paradise Druid is can't really attack with it.
Yeah, and Thespian Stage coming down here too, fully unlocking Evan's mana. And this Pore Over the Page is not going to be interacted with. This is huge. If he can find something like a Dig Through Time, he'll be in excellent shape. And he's actually playing a little bit slow, making an extra copy of Lotus Field now to maximize his mana for the next turn.
Yeah. Any reason to do that instant speed like that?
I think Assassin's Trophy.
Oh, sure.
Otherwise, this stage could be killed in response. So yeah, just make sure you can do it while you can.
Makes a lot of sense. Here's Obsidian, Ghost Council coming down. We'll drain Evan for 2 life, and Grant will go to 22. This is a card I've been seeing pop up a lot in Pioneer recently, since a lot of these combo decks like Nexus are going away. Everyone's kind of moving to mid-range. This seems like a really good card that can close out a mid-range matchup.
Yeah, beautiful card against blue light control, leaning on stuff like Sphinx's or Supreme Verdict. And you can see when it enters the battlefield, an opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. And at the beginning of your end step, you can exile Obsidian, protecting it from sorcery speed removal. And when it comes back into play on the next turn, it does have haste. So that's a good start. I also got to point out, I love seeing the Obsidian cast with a forest and an island on the field. But yeah, here we see Evan kind of beginning his combo turn with the Pore Over the Pages, casting it for 2 lands and still having a mana floating. And let's see if he picked up any big dig spells. Looks like a handful of bricks right now.
Yep. The one thing I want to mention about Obsidian is back in the day when it was really good against blue-white, it was phenomenal. But nowadays they have like Teferi to give that sorcery speed instant speed. Things like Seal Away make it difficult to actually attack with the 5/5. So it's Definitely different in this current metagame, and I don't know if it's the right answer yet, but it's definitely a hard permanent to deal with for sure. So I'm going to play out his whole hand here. Currently has 11 mana.
Yeah, really well stocked there. Deciding to cast Arboreal Grazer to give himself an extra life total buffer, in the face of the Obsidat, and that's interesting. I might have been tempted to hold one Grazer, just so in case you draw another copy of Pour Over the Pages, you have at least one card you're content discarding out of your hand, but looks like he's kind of prioritizing keeping the life total high and maximizing his draw steps before the game ends.
Makes a lot of sense. Another thing to note here, this Blast Zone, Obsidat is 5 mana, right? And
Yeah.
I think Niv-Mizzet also is each color, so it's 5 mana. So Blast Zone could clean up a lot of the problem permanents that Grant can put on the field. Here we see it's a fairy bouncing Obsidat to draw an extra card. We're going to replay it. Does a little bit of extra drain and gain.
And actually kind of a risky bounce. If Grant was to, say, draw a copy of Niv-Mizzet or a way to find it, he actually would cost himself a 5-drop in play doing it that way. So a little bit better in the absence of getting a good hit. And actually looks like he found a Knight of Autumn to kind of ratchet up the pressure a bit too. So yeah, Evan is now, he's on a bit of a timer. The Blast Zone will kill the Knight of Autumn, but Obsidat is gonna start to whittle away his life total, and Hidden Strings off the top is it's a bunch of mana for Evan, but he is already very well set in that category.
Right, needs to find something like a Dig Through Time, maybe a Shimmer of Possibility, Pour Over the Pages, some type of draw spell. I think is gonna be super important.
Yeah, absolutely. The Fae of Wishes, and I think he has about 10 excellent draws from this point. I think Emrakul, the Promised End, is actually very easily castable,
absolutely.
and a card that would just dominate the board state from here. So that would be a pretty unbelievable draw, though Evan is only bringing one copy of that card here today.
So, deciding, are we going to... So, it looks like Thespian Stage is going to copy Blast Zone, actually, which is interesting. And then he'll blow the Blast Zone. So, now he has a second copy of Blast Zone should he want it. Also, copying the Blast Zone, interestingly, has 0 counters now. So, you can actually kill zeros with Blast Zone in this kind of way.
Yeah, Thespian Stage is just a bizarre card. The amount of interactions with it goes well beyond just, make a 2020 in Legacy. So kind of cool to see some flexibility here in different formats. And here it is, though. Obsidat coming back. Evan down to 10. So he's only going to have one more draw step to find something of relevance. And here we see Thespian Stage. It's a land that taps for colorless, and you can have it become a copy of any land. And it does have that ability to continue to copy, swap, become other lands. And just beautiful in this deck. Extra copies of Lotus Field without the downside of having to sacrifice land. So it's a pretty, I would say, crucial piece to the whole puzzle.
Yeah, it's really kind of a unique thing. You can turn it into a basic land, and then it can't be fielded, and kind of protect it that way until you get your Lotus Fields online, and then you can copy it, and then it'll have hexproof. Just a lot of play with this card. It's insane.
Yeah, I've got to say, it's just shocking to me that Grant is in such a dominant position in this first game. Open decklist allowed him to have a hand. Really, he mulliganed at least once this game and found 3 critical interactive pieces. And the Obsidat is a wonderful card at ending the game quickly. And here, we see Bring to Light. Do we think this is going to get that copy of Unmoored Ego? Probably.
I think that would probably be Grant's best choice. He's already ahead on board. He just has to survive one turn. He doesn't need the Niv-Mizzet, I don't believe.
Let's see. Is he?
See if, and Bring to Light can get instant sorceries and creatures. Notably, it cannot get planeswalkers or enchantments.
Yeah, and you see, Grant's kind of pushing a Niv-Mizzet towards the front of the pile. Unmoored Ego is great, but Niv-Mizzet is just an Unmoored Ego some amount of the time, right? Why not get a free 6/6?
When you want to just show off to all your viewers, right? You're going to get the Niv-Mizzet every time.
Yeah, and I do think that this is giving Evan a little bit of breathing room to combo here, because really just one Dig Through Time can let him go completely crazy. But looks like we're going to spin the Niv-Mizzet wheel. You see it's a Wooburg Dragon where when it enters play, you flip over the top 10 cards, and for each different color pair, you can put one of those cards in your hand, and there it is. That's the Unmoored Ego. So Grant kind of, he gets his cake, and he gets to eat it too here this turn with extra pressure and disruption.
So the green-black spell will be Assassin's Trophy. The blue-white spell will be Teferi. The blue-black spell will be Unmoored Ego. And the rest of these will go to the bottom. Now, if he does cast Unmoored Ego, what do you think he names here?
Well, open deck lists are going to do a lot of good for Grant here. I think, let's see, naming Fae of Wishes does not stop Evan from winning because of that one Emrakul. You might just go for the draw spell that has the most copies left in the deck, which is Dig Through Time at this point. I think there's 3 of those floating around. So it's kind of a numbers game. Fae of Wishes is a bit more powerful guaranteed than Dig is, but there's less of it. So yeah, I think I'd probably go for Dig.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense to me. Naming something like the Emrakul seems like a mistake. I do think that's probably one of his only outs if you were to take away the phase.
Yeah, looks like Grant's actually choosing not to spend the mana on Mordigo. Can you think of any reason why he's holding that 4 up instead?
So we kind of talked about this earlier, where Omniscience is really Evan can only go off at a sorcery speed, and he did pick up a copy of Trophy, so maybe he's worried about an Omniscience coming down, and he can respond after the first spell.
No, that's actually that's a very fair point. It looks like he's considering potentially firing off the Trophy, end step after Evan does the charging of the Thespian Staged Blast Zone.
And we kind of talked about a Blast Zone on 5 would be a really big deal. And Evan could potentially get it to 5 and blow it up if he picked up a copy of like Vizier to untap it.
Yeah, which he actually does have a Hidden Strings in his hand. So that's a pretty interesting play by Grant. It's not something that is obvious because on its face value, that Blast Zone isn't capable of doing anything next turn. But actually, Evan did have most of what he needed to make that pop. And that's actually going to, unless Evan draws a relevant top card, that's going to let Grant close the game this turn. And Evan bricks. And wow, pretty impressive game 1 for the Niv-Mizzet deck here.
And this is kind of one of the things about this Lotus Field combo deck that we've been seeing is it does have a fail rate some number of the time. And if you can interact with its hand, 1 or 2 times, it might just be enough. So we're going to bring up, let's bring up Evan's player profile. Learn a little bit more about him. Evan is 24 years old. He's an associate scientist. What a title there. From Madison, Wisconsin. He qualified for this event. He was a part of the at-large bids. He was 6th place overall. He had 2 NRG CT top 8s this year, and his current record versus the field is 6-6, so he's right at that 50% mark. He's played on a Mythic Championship via an MCQW. He's a 9th place at Minneapolis 2019 with during GP Hogak. And then some fun facts here. Built and maintains a Pygao cube. I don't know what that is. Do you have any idea what that is?
Yeah, so Pygao, when you open a pack and you make 5 piles, kind of play that. It's interesting how you would translate that to a cube, but pretty interesting. Sure. But yeah, Evan, fantastic Magic player, qualified for multiple paper Pro Tours as well, but seriously, qualifying for an Arena Mythic Championship, only 16 players get to do that. That is a heck of an accomplishment. And here we can go over to Grant's slide as well, learn a little bit about Grant Wozniak, our 5-color Niv-Mizzet player here in this match. Here he is. He's a 25, an architect from Waukegan, Illinois. He was another at-large bid. Looks like the 11th place one. He's top-aided 1 CT, has a 7 and 8 record against the field, so pretty large sample size relative to a lot of our competitors. His top 8 did come from January this year and helped run an LGS in college, so a lot of experience just being around Magic. And some fun facts, he was an all-conference golfer in high school. Can't stand eating salads because of the texture of lettuce, and there's a lot of good reasons to not stand salads. That's a fine one.
But that's definitely like one of my top reasons too. The texture of lettuce is just so gross. I totally agree with you, Grant.
Yeah, thankfully, I can normally, Ranch can fix most things. I'm willing to let that one pass. And he does regret sinking thousands of dollars into shiny cardboard. We saw him with some beautiful Guru lands in his deck, and I believe Grant is going to have an all-foil Grixis Death Shadow list coming out in a little bit later today.
Nice.
So you'll be able to see some fancy cardboard on camera, and
he's going to regret it until that feature match we put him on where he's just got shiny everywhere.
Yeah, and here we do see, let's transition over to Grant's sideboard. The 5-color Niv-Mizzet deck, lots of options. You see lots of 1-Ms to help, kind of accentuate the flexibility of Bring to Light. And we have, going through this, 1 copy of Knight of Autumn, Tolsimir, Friend of Wolves, Ashiok Dreamrender, 2 copies of Dovin's Veto and Thought Erasure, 1 Anger of the Gods, Unmoored Ego, Supreme Verdict, Spring to Mind, Cindervines, and 3 Damping Spheres. So, Brad,
there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, a lot of action.
I like the Ashiok. Stop Sylvan Scrying. Can't search. Dovin's Veto is obviously very great. Thought Erasure is something that interacts with the hand. You got the 2nd copy of Unmoored Ego to help remove all the combo pieces. And then you got these Damping Spheres to prevent these Lotus Fields from generating a ton of mana.
Yeah, it's almost I mean, this has to be a pretty targeted sideboard, and it makes sense
Sort of,
because Grant does have a lot of dead cards in game one of this matchup. You know, his
right.
spot removal is going to be pretty unable to catch good targets. So, yeah, for him to steal that game one and have access to pretty close to 10 excellent sideboard cards is going to be a boon for him. And Evan's sideboard, actually pretty similarly one of Dense, you know, to take advantage of Fey of Wizards. So most of these cards likely won't be boarded in.
Right.
But we do see one copy of Omniscience, Enter the Infinite, Emrakul the Promised End, Jace Wielder of Mysteries, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, Fog, Finale of Revelation, Return to Nature, as well as 3 Anger of the Gods. Even though a blue-green deck showing, Lotus Field does let you cast that one pretty easily, as well as Mystical Dispute, Hour of Revelation, and 2 Thought Distortion. Yeah, so I think a lot of these one-ups are probably going to stay. It doesn't really seem like a matchup for Anger of the Gods, so I wonder if any of these tutor targets are good enough to replace some of the worst cards here in Evan's deck.
Yeah, this one's gonna be tough. I mean, I think you can bring in the Mystical Dispute and just hope to counter a spell. Could counter a Bring to Light. An early Unmoored Ego as well. You're definitely gonna want this Return to Nature to take care of those Damping Spheres, but you only have 1 copy, so that's gonna be a little rough. Not a ton here, and then Thought Distortion. I guess.
Yeah, that one seems okay. I don't think Evan is going to change a ton because at least on the game one setup, his deck is very structurally favored against the 5-color Niv-Mizzet. So
Right.
I think that it might still be best to leave the Return to Nature in the sideboard to maximize your Fey of Wishes
Sure.
utility. And yeah, it might just come down to maybe Thought Distortion. It's just the unfortunate thing is that it can sometimes get cast after the critical Bring to Light, you know, depending on how
Right,
Evan's
or
draw
like
is developing.
He nibs, draws a bunch of cards, and then you get to strip them all away.
Yeah, so that card does seem like it could absolutely make the list. And otherwise, though, I'm not seeing a ton. I think Evan's going to present very similar to his game one configuration.
So the question I have is, with these Return to Natures, is he going to have enough time to Fey and go get the Return to Nature? And like, is he wasting a Fey by going and get it, or should that card be in his main board?
I think that it's a Damping Sphere is just so devastating that you really, I think, need to maximize your ability to find them. And
Sure.
the beauty of Grant's deck is kind of in its card advantage, not necessarily its closing speed. So I think this is a matchup where Evan can afford to spend 6 mana total on setting up that find removal, cast removal.
Evan here on a Mold of 6 on the play. No Arboreal Grazer or anything like that to ramp him up. Looks like he has a copy of Thespian Stage and Lotus Field.
Yeah, the Lotus Field combo deck definitely a very big benefactor of the London Mulligan. Really a few small number of really critical pieces. So looks like Evan does have Thespian Stage and Lotus Field already. Now mostly looking for potentially extra ways to use that mana. Big draw spells. We see a dig amongst that Shimmer pile. Although maybe extra copies of something like Sylvan Scrying perhaps. Find another copy of Thespian Stage, make another Lotus Field, kind of go off that way.
There was certainly a lot. He has a lot of options in this possibilities. I saw an Ugin, an Emrakul. Don't think he's going to take those quite yet. Here we see Grant drawing. Something like a... Okay, there's the Damping Sphere we talked about.
Yeah, and that's going to be that's pretty rough for Evan. It makes this Lotus Field kind of unplayable. With only it only produces just the 1 mana, and you can't really afford to sacrifice 2 lands to get that on the battlefield, which means the Thespian Stage is rendered pretty useless. And yeah, let's take a deeper look at Damping Sphere. One of the less elegant hate cards that have come out over the last few years, but for 2 colorless mana, you can have a land. If it would tap for 2 or more mana, it produces a colorless instead of any other type and amounts, and each spell a player casts 1 more to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. So yeah, both sides actually looking very effective against the Lotus Field combo deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine not having, if this Lotus Field combo deck is going to be in the metagame, I can't imagine not having like 2 Damping Sphere in the side for it. Card just seems fantastic.
And here we see Evan continuing to shimmer. Not a ton that is going to be great for him. I think more than anything right now, he's just really digging for Fey of Wishes to set up that granted Return to Nature chain. And I don't believe he has either the 4th untapped land or the Fey quite yet. So he's quite a ways away.
Right. Here we saw Grant bring in Spring to Mind. For 3 mana, you get to search your library for basic land card, put it on the battlefield tap, so it's going to help him cast those Niv-Mizzets. And then the Aftermath side, 6 mana, draw 2 cards. This card was phenomenal in draft.
Yeah, absolutely. The definitely really good ones. Hour of Devastation came out, and the format slowed down quite a bit, and a really sensible card in Niv-Mizzet. The deck really wants to unlock those 5 drops a turn ahead of schedule, and having access to, when your deck has a lot of mana, a lot of Sylvan Caryatids, Gilded Geese lying around, having access to an expensive but really nice couple extra cards is just a lot of flexibility there.
So Blast Zone is another answer to Damping Sphere.
Yeah, really showing off the power of Sylvan Scrying. The card isn't just a tutor for your combo. You do actually get to find some slow removal off it. So, that's a big pickup for Evan. Critically though, we are coming into Grant's 5-mana turn, so we'll see if he can slam a Niv-Mizzet, Obsidian, Bring to Light, any of these to close the game before the Blast Zone can, because it has to charge to 2 and then pop.
Right.
That's going to eat up a lot of Evan's kind of future development mana.
Well, the thing is like he has to pop the Damping Sphere before he can play those Lotus Fields out. So it is very important for him to get this off the field probably next turn. I think he does have a Vizier. So he could potentially like charge it, untap, and pop it. Nope, he would need an additional mana, right?
Yeah, and here we see the turn 5 Niv-Mizzet here for Grant. So we'll see how many cards it yields this time.
So far, 4 lands. There's a Bring to Light, and a Thought Erasure, and Assassin's Trophy. Pretty much the 3 cards you wanted to get, I would assume.
Yeah, that's and honestly, putting all those lands on the bottom, not half bad either.
That's true.
And yeah, now Grant kind of has everything he needs rolled up. Extra Disruption, Assassin's Trophy to kill the Blast Zone and protect the Damping Sphere. A discard spell that you can cast in the same turn. Although I'm not sure if Grant's mana is actually set up as it needs to be to cast a blue-black and a black-green spell right now.
Sure.
One of the things that 5-color Niv-Mizzet does not have in Pioneer is a card like Arkham's Astrolabe to really piece it together.
Yeah, absolutely. That card looked so innocuous at the start, but I think everyone knew, like, this card's going to be played.
Yeah, I like Prophetic Prism, but it turns out if you have its mana cost and give it a restriction, that's not really a restriction to put Snowlands in your deck. It gets pretty insidious pretty fast.
People were putting Snowlands in their deck just so they could have Snowlands in their deck.
Yeah, I actually found a situation where my opponent swapped me an Icefang Coatl, and my Snowlands let it have Death Touch. I was like, okay, this is the absolute cornerest of corner cases, but I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Here we see that Thought Erasure being cast.
And really kind of nice sequencing of the turn by Grant. Not showing that he has access to Assassin's Trophy mana this turn as well, in case that might change how Evan decides to respond. And here we see a hand of, well, it has all the spells that Evan wants. Dig Through Time, Pour Over the Pages for card advantage, Hidden Strings, and Gross Spiral for kind of acceleration. But again, this is all being locked out by the Sphere, and looks like Dig is taken out. Sensible enough because that's the best card at finding copies of Fae of Wishes. And I suspect we'll see a follow-up trophy here pretty soon.
On that Blast Zone?
Yeah, yep, on the Blast Zone.
There's a little bit of a... He has to wait until he activates it. Because if he does it before, Thespian Stage can copy it.
Oh, yeah, excellent point. And the beauty from Grant's side is Evan doesn't really have the luxury to not activate. Because the Niv-Mizzet is closing the game so quickly, Evan can't really afford to have any patience about it. But when he knows the Assassin's Trophy is there, it kind of puts Evan in it. It almost feels like an impossible spot.
I feel like you almost have to wait and use that Botanical Sanctum next turn to potentially... I don't even know. It's tap to activate, so you can't like activate again in response. Maybe there's a way he can like copy it and then untap the Thespian Stage in response and then copy it again. But then how many turns is that going to take to charge it up to 5? That seems really rough. I think you just probably want him to make him use it at this point, right?
Yeah, I think if you make Grant use the trophy and just hope you draw a Fae of Wishes next turn, although you would need to draw a Fae of Wishes. Let's see. I guess maybe if Gross Spiral reveals a Fae or an untapped land, and then Evan's draw step reveals the other one of those 2 cards, then he would have the ability to have exactly enough mana to cast Fae, get Return to Nature, and then maybe go off on the one following turn he has before the Niv kills him. But instead, it's that Ugin off the top, which is powerful, but not really attainable, with 3 land drops short on Evan's side.
Right. And again, like, this damping sphere shutting off this Lotus Field is just so important, because if he would have been able to put in that Lotus Field, that is a ramp for him. And he could have potentially played Ugin this turn with the right draw step. But
changing the land from unbelievably explosive to completely just unplayable, you just cannot afford to put it on the battlefield. Gigantic swing, and looks like Evan's doing a bit of digging with the dig through time, finding an Emrakul, which is really unfortunate to see after you just put your entire graveyard in exile.
A little bit of a nombo there.
Yeah, not a ton of relevant action. Some lands. I think I might see a blue Finale hanging out, but yeah, it's just the Niv-Mizzet only needs 2 more attacks, so Evan has to plan under the assumption that he just gets 1 more turn past this. And looking at his list, he actually only has the 1 copy of Blast Zone, really leaning on Sylvan Scrying to find it, Thespian Sage to copy it if need be. So that means once it's in the graveyard, once it's actually exiled from the game, that effect's gone. There's just no way to replicate it.
Now he can Growth Spiral into a land. That gets him to 6. Play a land this turn. That's 7. And then hope to draw a land next turn. That'd be 8 lands. Play Ugin.
Yeah, that sequence could work, and it's going to, I guess, just if the next 2 cards on the top of the library for Evan are untapped lands, he competes together that way.
Right.
And that's going to have to rely on Grant having nothing, but I think that's fine for Evan to make that plan, because he's in a bad spot right now, and when you're so far behind, you just have to say, you know what, I'm willing to lose to a Stiff Breeze. I'm just going to do my best to play to my outs, and Grant does have a lot of cards that, fundamentally aren't great against Lotus Field, so if he had too much removal that he couldn't board out, if he has smaller threats that take multiple turns to attack Evan down, or smaller threats that play into an Ugin, that could be something that Evan could beat here.
So we're going to shock in the Hollowed Fountain. I think that's going to pretty much seal this up, because I think Grant now has Unmoored Ego as well as a Drown in the Lock. I think that was his draw for the turn. Well, you mentioned he needed untapped land, but this one could be a tapped land. There's a Lumbering Falls. And now if he can draw an untapped land for turn, we can land this Ugin. Oof.
Yeah, and critically, Hidden Strings being a card that functions like a ritual, but not really in this situation, because there's no lands that can produce multiple mana because of Damping Sphere. Playing any spell on a Damping Sphere board means that your mana is going to be constrained whenever you cast the next thing, and kind of a fruitless pour over the pages, and Grant takes this match in 2 games.
Yeah, that was, I feel like game 1, Grant got very fortunate, kind of hit the right third of his deck, to really compete with what Evan had going on, and then post-board we saw Grant just had 10 spells to bring in that were all just so good against Evan.
Yeah, it's wild. The beauty of mid-range is that you always have the ability to hit the right spells. And honestly, in Grant's main deck, I think there are like 5 cards that I'm happy to draw, and he hit 3 of them, plus a clock. So, yeah, really a steal of a game from Grant, and he capitalized on that by really dominating the post board. So that's actually going to put Grant to 2-0 in his pod. He's actually going to be the winner of it. And truth be told, I wasn't expecting to see anyone play Niv-Mizzet, first of all, and to see it kind of run Grant into a really great position early in the tournament is, it's surprising and impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet to see. If you're not familiar with our structure, so right now we're podding everyone into groups of 4 people. So we'll do 3 rounds in each pod. So we'll have 3 stages, 1 for each format. And if you 2-0 your first 2 rounds, in the last round of that pod, we'd have a 2-0 facing an 0-2. And regardless of how that match would play out, the 2-0 will always be the first seed in the pod. And so we're just not even going to Grant doesn't even have to play next round, because we know he's already won the pod, whether or not he wins or loses. And so he'll earn that coveted 3 points for stage 1, which is going to be pretty sweet. And if you have more questions on how the structure is going to work throughout this weekend, you can type !structure in chat, and then get a nice little video that Max Khan, our coordinator, and Joe Lissette talk about it. Next year, why don't we pull up the schedule for next year, actually? So, appreciate everybody following along with the series. So, looking at 2020 next year, we're going to have weekend events, so Saturday and Sunday. Both are going to be $5,000 trials. You can see our next one is going to be in Gurnee, Illinois. I believe that's at the water park again. And that's January 11th and 12th, and that will be Modern and Legacy.
Yeah, really cool. I love a lot of things about the NRG series, but being one of the premier tournament organizers to continue to support Legacy is awesome. The format, it looks like it's in a pretty pretty interesting spot
Yeah.
post Ren and 6 ban. There's a lot of snow stuff going on, but you still see some dark depth strategies. We actually have a wonderfully diverse legacy field here for our third stage today. We'll get to that in a little bit. And we have a bit of a new location too. Have you been to Indianapolis before, Brad, or is this the first time?
So we've been outside Indy, but we decided this year we really need to hit kind of the core city there, and so yeah, we're going to Indy February 15th and 16th. That's going to be real sweet, and that'll be a Pioneer Modern event. That one I'm expecting a huge turnout. People love their Modern, and Pioneer is just super hyped right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of rounding out our first season by going to Milwaukee on March 21st and 22nd for Team Constructed, which I believe we have structured as Pioneer, Modern, and Legacy.
Yes.
And
so no Standard. We'll see. Hopefully Standard starts to turn around a little bit. I think all of the tournament organizers are pretty much not running Standard events much nowadays. But yeah, we're really excited about that.
yeah, and next year we're really ramping up the amount of total prize money we're giving out. $150,000 over the course of the year. We have Players Tours invites at stake as well during our 10K showdowns. And we are going to do a championship next year. We're slimming the field down to 16 players. They're going to be our top performers point-wise over the course of the year, as well as showdown winners. And yeah, if you want to get in on the action, lots of opportunities next year on the NRG series, and we hope to see people showing up. When we come back in January.
So yeah, we're gonna bring you round 3 of Pioneers shortly. We're gonna work on some technical issues we've been facing this morning, and we'll be back as soon as we can. See you guys soon.